Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm your host, Amanda Lamb. In today's deep dive conversation with WRAL reporter Keenan Willard, we're talking about his coverage of the devastating tornado that touched down in parts of Edgecombe and Nash Counties on July 19th, leaving catastrophic damage in its path. Homes, small businesses, and major businesses like the Pfizer pharmaceutical plant were damaged or destroyed. Part of the roof of that plant in Rocky Mount was torn off. They lost 50,000 pallets of medicine, about 100 vehicles, and the plant closure has put hundreds of people out of work. Keenan was the first reporter on the ground for WRAL in the Dorchester community in Nash County. Keenan, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Amanda. And you spelled out really the impact, really the immediate impact that we felt both across Nash and Edgecombe counties, with the final tally being just dozens of homes, several small businesses, and obviously a lot of people facing the prospect of losing everything really quickly.
Yeah, and take me back to last Wednesday, July 19th, when you got this call. What did you learn pretty immediately about the path that this took and how long this took, and where did you go?
We were directed really out of the gate towards just northwest of Rocky Mount to the Dorchester community in Nash County, saying that we had confirmed reports from the NWS of a tornado touchdown there. So got out there, and even just I'm based in Rocky Mount, so I was coming sort of from the east to get there. As you approached even 5 miles away, it became clear that there was a severe storm even before reaching the epicenter. Intersections with no power, police officers directing traffic, and a lot of confusion. You started, as you got closer, to see some of the hallmarks of a major storm and a few branches in the road and trees down. But reaching the Town Hall Road area, where it was like that epicenter of the touchdown, where the real carnage began, was something that I had never experienced after a storm in all of my 27 years basically living in North Carolina. Just the road not even visible because of the sheer number of fully developed tree trunks that had been pulled down across it, power lines. And aside from just the debris and the trash, I stood in one spot on Town Hall Road and I could see 5 homes that had just been caught up in this path of the storm as it moved across the street. And in 3 cases, I would say, just decimated houses, total losses. The storm moved directly over them, tearing off the roof, knocking down the walls, and in one case doing so when there was a family with 3 small children hiding in the laundry room and just trying to take cover seconds before this historic storm passed directly over them. And miraculously, none of them were hurt. But it was really this kind of awe-inspiring moment of standing and turning in a 360-degree circle and just seeing the path that this monstrous storm took and the damage that it did in just minutes.
Yeah, and I know as a reporter, I've been covering news as long as you've been alive. When you said 27 years, I started thinking I've been doing this for more than 3 decades. And it doesn't matter how many times you cover something like this or you see it, there's this level of anxiety when you get on the ground thinking about what you're going to find. And I know initially when you got to Dorchester, you found out that, at least in that moment, there weren't reports of serious injuries. And that had to be pretty amazing considering what you were seeing.
It was this conversation of, I'm calling back to the newsroom. We've had reports of people showing up to the hospital, but out of the gate, no fatalities reported. That was the mindset that I was in when I pulled up onto the street. And I sort of had this moment where I was like, there's no way that there's not going to be just really some horrific injuries or worse as a result of what I'm seeing. That did not compute with seeing a house that had people inside of it that was essentially just a shell of itself after these high winds. There was one home that I saw where you could barely even make out that a house had been there because it was so just shredded by the wind, but also the mess of trees, huge tree trunks that had been brought down on it, just smashing right through the middle of it. You kind of had this moment where you're like, how bad is the final report of this going to be? when we finally get all the information. And being there over the hours, it kind of went from this moment of, as you said, anxiety, where you show up to a scene where your job is to get the lay of the land very quickly and understand the magnitude, and kind of expecting the worst, to really conversations with people who were expressing like gratitude, saying that this was kind of miraculous in a way. A historic storm like this and a historic tornado, dealing this kind of damage and ruining homes like this with people inside, and yet no one was even seriously hurt. So that was kind of, there was like a tone transition over the hours that I was there, where people went from obviously that fear, shock, and anxiety to almost breathing a sigh of relief, if that makes sense.
Well, we will talk more about who you talked to at that scene after the break. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. Keenan, before the break, we were talking about your experience on the ground at Dorchester right after this tornado came through. And you interviewed a man named Brian, who was incredibly composed despite this devastation. And they had major damage, not to just one home, but multiple family homes. Tell me about talking to him. What was that like? I mean, he was just really very composed. It was pretty amazing considering what he and his family had been through.
Oh yeah. So Brian Varnell, it was, as far as impacts from that storm go, about as bad as you could imagine. That street, Town Hall Road in Dorchester, is home to where actually 3 separate family homes were based. And you could kind of watch and trace the path of the tornado as it ripped through three of these homes belonging to family members. And in, I'd say, 2 cases, just left nothing behind. There was one where the roof was ripped off about half of the house and the attic was exposed. But for the other 2, they were total losses. Just, you could see immediately there was nothing left. And so it was, as you said, really, really just an impressive conversation to have with this person, kind of at the ground zero for this storm and the impact for his family. I mean, he was very, very put together in explaining to me that his sister and her 3 children had been inside this, what just an hour earlier had been a standing home, and had the tornado passed directly over them. They were in the laundry room, just really praying and hunkering down for their lives. And it just decimated the walls, roof around them, and left basically nothing. And yet they were not seriously hurt. And so he was like adamant. The message that he kept delivering to me was that, I mean, really all of this was a blessing, that out of the entire situation, that it was not worse. He was not mourning the loss of a family member. He was like, all of this can be replaced, which was a pretty incredible mindset, considering if you look at the whole swath of the damage across both Nash and Edgecombe, they were probably among the hardest hit in terms of just regular people.
And that was just right after it had come through. And, this was an evolving story. And of course, in the news, we learn things a little bit at a time. And eventually, WRAL did learn that there was a couple, Dale and Ricky Carter, in Edgecombe County, who did have some serious injuries. Tell me what happened to them.
So over the course of 2 days, I was in Dorchester for most of Wednesday, and then the next day we kind of traced the path of the storm as it went for miles into sort of the North Rocky Mount Battleboro community in the Edgecombe County side of the area. And so getting out to this, it was on Cokertown Road. We had gotten a report from the Edgecombe County Sheriff's Office that there were 2 people who suffered life-threatening injuries. That information came in on Wednesday. I ended up kind of just tracing the path of the damage, finding the home where this had taken place. And I went up and spoke with the family, who said, basically they had a plot of land with like multiple trailers set up on it. They all kind of lived on this one tract of land in separate homes, and they saw the tornado coming. Dale was this woman's daughter, and her husband, Ricky, they lived in a building out sort of behind the main home. And so everyone was trying to rush towards the house, but they weren't able to make it in time. So they tried to take shelter in this kind of 1-room shed. And the family tells me that after the tornado passed, they walked out on their deck and that building was gone, where her daughter and her husband had just been moments before. It was missing. There was nothing there but just a few trees that had been pulled down. And so they obviously in a panic, run outside. They find the foundation of that building like 20 feet away, and then they look out. This couple had been carried probably over 100 feet in the air into a field and dropped there. And the family tells me in that moment they didn't even know if they were still alive. The couple, they get out there, multiple broken bones. You could tell they had been obviously severely injured, so they were hospitalized. Dale had bleeding on her brain. I believe she broke her pelvis as well, and she's expected to recover. But Ricky Carter had broken multiple bones and obviously suffered severe traumatic injuries as a result of being just carried by the storm. And unfortunately, the family tells me he had been battling cancer for a while before this. And so obviously his prospects for recovering from a traumatic situation like this and his injuries
are much harder. Yeah.
Not as good. So they are in a position now where they're kind of holding their breath and praying that he pulls through.
And I mean, this puts a fine point on the human cost of this storm. And there's a bigger human cost in a way when you look at just the devastation to this whole area in terms of the economy, because the Pfizer plant employed so many people. And I know that you cover this area on a regular basis. I mean, what are people saying in terms of, how in the world are they going to get through this?
There was certainly a major question, a look around the room and like a holding your breath moment, because obviously we got those visuals of just what had happened to the Pfizer plant and seeing their main warehouse with the entire roof just ripped off to shreds, and sort of seeing that, this huge major employer, backbone of the area and the economy there, and knowing that this was happening like 2 years after essentially the same thing had happened to the QVC plant out on the Edgecombe County side of Rocky Mount. And, that huge anchor for the community there that employed so many people suffered this huge kind of act of God situation and did not come back. They left. And so there was this moment where we're asking questions. Economic developers are asking questions like, what is going to happen to this other anchor for this community? Can we survive 2 blows like this, really back to back almost? And so it did turn into a situation where we learned pretty quickly that Pfizer was going to continue to maintain operations in the area, that they were committed to building back, committed to paying employees while they were offline. But still, it is a situation where, as you said, this company that really not just an anchor for the Rocky Mount community, but also this huge supplier of medication on a nationwide scale, they're out of commission for who knows how long while they build back. And really, it's just going to be waiting and seeing. But we do at least have the commitment this time that Pfizer is going to remain in the area, and they are committed to building back. So kind of a sigh of relief from the leadership in that area.
Absolutely. But just such a fluid situation for so many people, individuals, homeowners, small businesses, people obviously who depend on Pfizer for their economy. So it's definitely going to be a long road, I'm sure, to recovery. And just to wrap this up, I mean, Keenan, you've really given us such a visual of what this experience was like. I have so many memories from so many natural disasters I've covered over the years, and hurricanes included, and they really do stay with you. And you mentioned that this was the worst thing you had seen in your career. Kind of reflecting on it now, I mean, how has this experience touched you personally?
I think I went through sort of the same process that the people who in the moment sort of experienced there. I think that's just a product of going to a disaster site, in the minutes after it happened. You go through, obviously it wasn't your home that was destroyed, but when information is coming in as fluidly as that, you sort of, you're part of the process too, and going through the range of emotions and learning new information. And it does have a profound impact on you, because we as reporters in these moments, we're kind of like filters for the emotions and information of the community to get it out for everyone to understand. It all passes through us because we have to understand it and feel it to be able to convey it to everyone. And so I really did go through that same process of getting out there, sort of this, oh my God moment of seeing the damage and thinking the worst, and then speaking with people and getting these overwhelming messages of gratitude in what felt like an impossible situation for them to be conveying that. And it really was something. I mean, I'm standing there with the mayor, who is like looking around with his hands on his hips, like, I mean, we're going to be resilient. We can do this. And it definitely has an impact on you, seeing that kind of positivity radiated from not just the words of people, but also like seeing the neighbors come out, and people whose homes were literally 100 feet from their neighbor whose house was just eradicated and their house was not touched, but they were out there. How do we help? How do we get the furniture out of the house? Do you need water or food? What can we do? There was this, like, what's going to stay with me. And what happened to me that day was just processing this overwhelming display of humanity in a terrible moment on its face for this community, but just turning it into something that was really hopeful.
Keenan, thank you so much for sharing your experience and for all of your hard work on this story. Our hearts go out to the survivors, and we hope they will get the support they need as they work on rebuilding their lives and their communities. If you're listening to this podcast on WRAL.com or the WRAL app, you can also find it on any podcast app: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast. Pretty much anywhere podcasts live, you'll find more episodes of the WRAL Daily Download. Thanks always for listening.